In the deep winter of late December, silence ruled the forests of the Ardennes. Snow lay heavy on the ground, thick enough to swallow sound. Branches bent under ice, frozen in place. The sky was low and gray, blending seamlessly with the forest below. Somewhere between the trees, entire armies were waiting. German soldiers stood packed together in narrow forest clearings. Boots sank into snow. Rifles were gripped with hands so cold they could barely feel the metal. Breath rose slowly, then vanished. Many of these men had not eaten properly in days. Some had marched through the night. They had been ordered not to speak, not to smoke, not to move. For weeks, they had lived with a single thought: this is it. They had been told this attack would decide the war, that there would be no second chance, that Germany had placed everything it had left on one final throw of the dice. If it worked, the Allies could still be defeated in the West. If it failed, nothing would stop them. This was Adolf Hitler's last gamble. This was the Battle of the Bulge. By the final months of 1944, Nazi Germany was bleeding from every direction. In the east, Soviet armies pressed relentlessly forward, consuming entire German divisions. In the air, Allied bombers shattered cities, factories, railroads, and oil facilities. German civilians slept in shelters more often than in their beds. In the west, the situation looked just as grim. The Allied landings in Normandy had broken the Atlantic Wall and opened the door to Western Europe. Once the breakout came, German defenses collapsed faster than anyone had predicted. Entire units retreated in disorder. Paris was liberated. France was reclaimed. American, British, and Canadian forces surged forward, their advance fueled by momentum and overwhelming resources. To Allied commanders, the war now seemed less about survival and more about speed. The question was no longer whether Germany would be defeated, but how quickly Allied armies could reach German soil. Among the soldiers, optimism spread. Men spoke of home, of wives and parents they had not seen in years. Christmas decorations appeared surprisingly close to the front. Some soldiers joked that this would be their last winter in uniform. But beneath the surface, warning signs appeared. The Allied advance had pushed beyond its logistical limits. Supply lines stretched hundreds of kilometers back to the Normandy beaches. Trucks broke down. Fuel shortages halted tank units. Ammunition deliveries lagged behind advancing infantry. Entire American divisions had not rotated out of combat since Normandy. The men were exhausted, physically drained, and mentally worn down. Officers noticed slower reaction times, mistakes, and declining morale. To give these units time to recover, commanders assigned them to sectors considered quiet. The Ardennes was one of those sectors. The region was thick with forests and narrow roads. It was cold, foggy, and difficult to navigate even in good weather. Allied intelligence believed Germany lacked both the manpower and fuel to launch any large operation there. The Ardennes was the perfect place to rest. But Adolf Hitler saw it as the perfect place to attack. To him, the Ardennes represented history and opportunity. 4 years earlier, German armored columns had charged through the same forests and shocked the world. France fell in weeks. Allied armies collapsed in disbelief. Hitler convinced himself it could happen again. Inside his headquarters, Hitler became increasingly detached from reality. He refused reports that contradicted his vision. Instead, he focused on a single idea: a massive counteroffensive that would shatter Allied confidence and force political change. His plan was audacious to the point of insanity. German armies would strike west through the Ardennes. They would smash through thin American lines, advance rapidly toward the Meuse River, and push on to capture Antwerp, the Allies' most important supply port. If Antwerp fell, Allied logistics would collapse. Fuel and ammunition would dry up. British and American forces would be cut apart. Hitler believed the Western Allies, faced with disaster, might seek peace. German generals were horrified. They pointed out the obvious. Germany lacked fuel. Tanks could move only if Allied supplies were captured along the way. The Luftwaffe could not protect the offensive if the weather cleared. And Germany no longer had the manpower to replace heavy losses. Hitler overruled them all. Everything would be committed. There would be no reserve. The operation was given a name heavy with symbolism: Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine. Preparations began under conditions of absolute secrecy. German divisions moved only at night. Tanks were hidden beneath trees and netting. Roads were camouflaged. Radios were strictly silent. Even many German soldiers did not know where they were going, only that they were heading into something decisive. By December, more than 200,000 German troops had assembled, veterans from the Eastern Front, inexperienced recruits, panzer crews clinging to machines that lacked spare parts or fuel. They waited in freezing silence as winter storms concealed them. The Allies saw nothing. Part 2 continues. Expanded collapse, Bastogne in extreme detail, Patton maneuver, logistics failure, aftermath, psychological impact, lessons of the battle, and why this battle doomed Germany permanently, enough to push the total length safely past 50 minutes. When the German offensive finally erupted, the shock to Allied command was immediate and absolute. Reports coming in from the Ardennes made little sense. Units were missing. Entire sections of the front had gone silent. Roads that were supposed to be secure were suddenly under enemy control. At first, many Allied officers believed the situation was temporary. A strong local attack, they assumed. Dangerous, but manageable. They did not yet understand the scale of what was happening. German infantry poured through gaps in the American lines, advancing under thick fog and snowfall. Panzer units followed closely behind, pushing relentlessly along narrow roads that wound through forests and villages. Traffic jams formed as tanks, trucks, and horse-drawn artillery struggled to move through the same frozen routes. Despite these challenges, the early advance stunned the Allies. Entire American units were caught off guard. Some fought desperately, holding crossroads and villages against overwhelming odds. Others found themselves surrounded before they had even organized a defense. Communication collapsed as telephone lines were destroyed and radios failed in the cold. Maps became unreliable. Front lines no longer existed in any meaningful sense. The war broke apart into fragments. Scattered battles fought from house to house, forest to forest, often with little sense of what was happening beyond the next hill. Winter made everything worse. Temperatures dropped relentlessly. Snowstorms erased visibility. Soldiers struggled to stay awake, knowing that falling asleep in the cold could mean death. Weapons froze. Engines failed. Evacuation of the wounded became almost impossible. For American troops, the cold was compounded by lack of proper equipment. Many units had been sent to the Ardennes to rest, and had not been issued full winter gear. Feet froze inside wet boots. Hands lost feeling inside thin gloves. Medics treated frostbite almost as often as combat wounds. German soldiers suffered as well. Many were poorly equipped and underfed, survivors of years of warfare. Their uniforms were often inadequate for the cold. But the advance continued, driven by orders that left no room for hesitation. Speed was everything. German commanders knew their fuel reserves were dangerously low. Every kilometer forward meant less fuel for the return. The entire offensive depended on capturing Allied supply dumps along the way. When German forces overran American depots, tanks surged forward again. When fuel ran out, entire columns stalled in the open, vulnerable and exposed. The deeper the Germans pushed, the worse their situation became. As the battle intensified, the brutality of the conflict escalated. Near the town of Malmedy, American soldiers were captured by German SS units during the confusion of the advance. Instead of being sent to the rear as prisoners of war, they were executed in the snow. When news of the massacre filtered through Allied lines, its impact was immediate and profound. For many American soldiers, the battle changed instantly. Fear was replaced by determination. Mercy vanished from the conversation. Orders were clear. Even if unspoken, surrender was no longer an option. The conflict hardened on both sides. At the heart of the German advance lay a problem that had not been fully addressed in the planning stage. A small town that controlled nearly every major road through the region. Bastogne. Bastogne was not large. It was not heavily fortified. But it sat at a crossroads through which 7 major roads passed. Any German force attempting to advance west needed control of Bastogne to maintain supply and momentum. American airborne units were rushed toward the town with almost no time to prepare. Some arrived without winter clothing. Others carried minimal ammunition. But they arrived first. Soon, Bastogne was surrounded. German forces encircled the town completely, cutting every road in and out. Supplies dwindled rapidly. Artillery shells crashed into the town day and night. Buildings burned. Basements and cellars became hospitals as wounded soldiers piled up. Medical staff worked without rest. They lacked morphine, blankets, even bandages. Surgeons operated in freezing rooms, doing what they could to keep men alive. Food was rationed carefully. Ammunition was counted shot by shot. German officers sent messengers under white flags, demanding surrender. They warned the Americans that further resistance would lead to total destruction. The American reply became famous: nuts. What the Germans did not fully understand was that Bastogne represented more than a tactical obstacle. It was becoming a symbol. Every hour the town held disrupted the German timetable. Every day the defenders survived forced German units to divert strength away from the main thrust. The offensive began to slow. Meanwhile, the one factor Hitler had counted on began to turn against him: the weather. For days, heavy cloud cover, fog, and snow had grounded Allied aircraft. This allowed German forces to move largely unseen. But winter storms never last forever. When the skies finally cleared, the balance of power shifted instantly. Allied aircraft filled the air in overwhelming numbers. Fighter bombers hunted German columns stranded on narrow roads. Fuel trucks turned into fireballs. Artillery positions were destroyed. Bridges were smashed. German supply lines disintegrated. Without air cover and without fuel, the German advance began to suffocate. Units that had pushed forward aggressively now found themselves isolated, unable to receive supplies or reinforcement. Tanks were abandoned for lack of fuel. Vehicles were destroyed by their own crews to keep them from falling into Allied hands. At the same time, Allied commanders launched their counterattack. General George S. Patton, commanding the U.S. Third Army, executed one of the most dramatic maneuvers of the war. Pivoting his entire force north through ice-covered roads and brutal winter weather, Patton drove toward Bastogne with remarkable speed. The march was a test of endurance. Vehicles slid into ditches. Roads were clogged with refugees and wreckage. German resistance was fierce, but Patton pushed relentlessly forward. When Allied forces finally broke through and relieved Bastogne, the psychological effect was immense. For the defenders, it meant survival. For the Germans, it marked the beginning of the end. The illusion of German success shattered. Momentum evaporated. What had been envisioned as a bold thrust toward Antwerp became a desperate struggle to avoid encirclement. German units attempted to pull back, but retreat proved almost as dangerous as the advance. Fuel shortages made movement impossible. Allied air attacks intensified. Losses mounted daily. Veteran German soldiers, men with years of combat experience, were lost in numbers that Germany could no longer replace. Tanks, artillery, and vehicles destroyed in the Ardennes could not be rebuilt or resupplied. By the time the fighting finally subsided, the front lines had returned almost to their original positions. On the map, it appeared that little had changed. In reality, everything had changed. The Battle of the Bulge represented the last major German offensive on the Western Front. Hitler had committed the final reserves of men, fuel, and equipment in a desperate bid to change the course of the war. It had failed. After the Ardennes, Nazi Germany no longer possessed the strength to mount a strategic counterattack. From that point on, German forces would fight only defensive battles, slowly retreating under relentless Allied pressure. For the Allies, the battle had been costly and terrifying. But it had also confirmed something essential. Germany could no longer win. The road to the Rhine now lay open. Beyond it stood the heart of the Third Reich, and Berlin itself. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, surrounded by snow and shattered metal, Germany's fate had been sealed. What began as Adolf Hitler's final gamble ended as the beginning of the inevitable end. This was the Battle of the Bulge, and after it, the outcome of the war in Europe was no longer in doubt.